A millionaire is walking in the park with his daughter when he spots in the distance the little beggar girl he's been helping for months. The poor child runs toward them with a beaming smile and, pointing at the millionaire's daughter, says something that makes his world come to a halt. "Uncle, do you know my sister?" He laughs, thinking it's just a child's joke, but when he decides to take a closer look, he notices something that makes him faint instantly. What he discovers next leaves him utterly devastated. The afternoon sun filtered gently through the canopy of Riverside Park, creating a golden mosaic on the ground where Edward Morgan walked slowly, watching his daughter Isabella run among the other children. At 42, he had built a business, empire that had earned him not only a fortune, but also the respect of high society. Every detail of his life was meticulously planned, from mealtimes to moments of leisure with his family. Isabella at 7 was his most precious jewel. Her brown hair shone in the sun as she played on the swing, her crystal-clear laugh echoing through the park like music. Edward smiled, adjusting his wristwatch. In exactly 15 minutes they would return home, where his wife Claire would already be preparing dinner with the precision he so admired. "Daddy, look how high I'm going," Isabella shouted, waving enthusiastically from the swing. "Careful, princess," Edward replied, his voice heavy with paternal protection. "Not too high." It was in that moment that his gaze caught a familiar figure. On the horizon, there she was again, the little street girl he had been feeding for months with spare change and sandwiches. The child couldn't have been more than 7, always in the same tattered clothes, but her eyes shone with a light that defied her miserable condition. Edward felt a tightness in his chest every time he saw her. There was something about that girl that touched him deeply, a vulnerability that stirred painful memories of his own difficult childhood. He could never explain why he felt such an intense connection to a homeless child, but he always made sure she had at least one meal whenever he found her. The girl spotted him from a distance, and her face lit up as if she had seen an angel. She ran towards him with a contagious joy, her bare feet dancing across the freshly cut grass. The familiar scent of the park, a mix of damp earth, flowers, and childhood fun, enveloped the perfect afternoon. "Mr. Edward," she yelled, stopping before him with a radiant smile that revealed a few missing teeth. "You came to visit." Edward smiled, pulling a few dollars from his pocket. "Hello, little one. How are you today?" "I'm good, sir. Really good." She shook her head vigorously, her tangled hair dancing in the wind. It was then that her eyes fixed on Isabella, who had stopped playing and was walking curiously toward her. "Father." The poor girl looked at Isabella with an expression of recognition that made Edward frown. There was something strange in that look, a familiarity that made no sense. The two children stared at each other for a moment that felt like an eternity, as if they were recognizing each other after a long separation. "Daddy, who is she?" Isabella asked, moving closer and taking her father's hand. The street girl looked from Edward to Isabella, then back to Edward. Her smile grew even brighter, and she pointed a small, dirty finger directly at Isabella. "Mr. Edward," she said with an innocence that made his heart stop, "you already know my sister." The world around Edward seemed to freeze. The sound of children playing turned into a distant hum. He looked from the poor girl to Isabella, and it was then that he saw something that made his blood run cold. The two children were practically identical, not just their facial structure, the color of their hair, or the shape of their eyes. When Isabella turned her head slightly, confused by the other girl's declaration, Edward saw something that left him breathless, a small star-shaped birthmark on the tip of her left ear, the same mark the poor girl had in the exact same spot. Edward remained motionless for long seconds, his inner world collapsing as he watched the two girls. The rationality that had always governed his life fought against a reality that seemed torn from an impossible dream. He blinked several times, hoping the vision would dissolve, but the resemblance remained, stark and undeniable. "What did you say?" Edward murmured, his voice barely audible. The poor girl tilted her head, confused by his reaction. "I said you know my sister, mister. She looks just like me, doesn't she?" She smiled again, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Isabella looked at the other child with growing curiosity. "Daddy, she really does look like me," she said, unconsciously touching her own left ear. "She even has the same little star as me." Edward felt his legs weaken. He knelt slowly, bringing himself to the girl's level, studying every feature of their faces with a detective's intensity. The shape of their eyes, the line of their nose, the curve of their lips, everything was identical. Even the way they tilted their heads was the same. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Edward asked the poor girl, his voice trembling slightly. "My name is Sophia, Mr. Edward. The grandma who took care of me called me that." She fiddled with the hem of her torn t-shirt. "But she went away 2 weeks ago, and now I live by myself in the place we used to sleep." A knot formed in Edward's throat. "By yourself? Where exactly?" "In a little spot under the Grand Avenue Bridge," Sophia answered matter-of-factly, as if it were normal for a 7-year-old to live on the streets. "But it's not too far from here. I always come to the park because it's where I feel happiest." "And you said I'm your sister?" Isabella asked, her childish innocence navigating the extraordinary situation more easily than her father. "Yes, from the very first. Time I saw you here in the park, I knew we were sisters," Sophia explained, her eyes shining. "I could feel it in my heart." She tapped her chest. "Didn't you feel it too?" Isabella nodded slowly. "I did. Whenever I saw you, I wanted to play with you." "Daddy, can I play with Sophia?" Edward was in total shock. His analytical mind worked furiously, trying to find logical explanations for the impossible. Twins separated at birth, but he was there when Isabella was born. He remembered every detail of that day, or at least he thought he did. "Sophia," he said carefully, "do you know anything about your parents? About when you were born?" The girl shook her head sadly. "Grandma always said I was found when I was just a tiny baby. She said a very elegant lady brought me for her to take care of, but she never came back. Grandma stayed with me until she got very sick." A chill ran down Edward's spine. An elegant lady. His mind flew to his wife, Claire, then to his mother, Helen. Both were described as elegant by everyone who knew them. "And do you remember anything about this lady?" Edward pressed, ignoring Isabella's confused look. "Not much, mister. I was too little, but Grandma said she said something strange, that I should stay away from the big city until I was much older, that it was dangerous for me." Sophia's words echoed in Edward's mind like an alarm bell. Dangerous? Why would it be dangerous for a child to be in the city, unless someone didn't want her to be found? "Daddy, why are you so quiet?" Isabella asked, touching her father's arm. Edward looked at his daughter, then at Sophia. The resemblance wasn't just physical, there was something deeper, a similar energy, a way of expressing themselves that was frighteningly identical, as if they were the same person split into two bodies. "I'm just surprised," he answered, trying to remain calm. "Sophia, would you like to come with us? We can have lunch together, talk some more." Sophia's eyes lit up like fireworks. "Really, Mr. Edward, I can go with you." "Please, Daddy," Isabella begged, holding her father's arm. "I want to show Sophia my toys." Edward nodded, but his mind was in turmoil. He needed to understand what was happening. He needed to uncover the truth about Sophia, about her birth, about everything. But a part of him already knew, deep in his soul, that his life would never be the same again. As they walked towards the car, watching the two girls chat as if they were lifelong friends, Edward realized he was about to uncover secrets that could destroy everything he believed to be true about his family. The drive to the Morgan estate was filled with a tense silence, broken only by the crystal-clear laughter of the two girls in the back seat. Edward watched in the rearview mirror as Sophia and Isabella interacted with a naturalness that defied all logic. They finished each other's sentences, laughed at the same things, and even their gestures were synchronized. "Sophia, have you ever been in a car before?" Isabella asked, holding her new friend's hand. "Only once, when I was really little," Sophia replied, her eyes wide with wonder at the luxurious interior of the vehicle. "But I remember I felt safe, just like now." A lump formed in Edward's throat. How could a 7-year-old remember something from when she was a baby, unless that car ride had been traumatic enough to sear itself into her memory? Upon arriving at the mansion, Edward watched Sophia's reaction. She didn't show the astonishment one would expect from a street child faced with such opulence. Instead, she looked around with a vague expression of recognition, as if the environment were familiar to her. "It's a very big house," Sophia murmured. "But it looks like a place I've dreamed of." Edward felt a shiver. His wife, Claire, appeared at the main door, elegant as always, but her smile froze when she saw the dirty child next to Isabella. "Edward, who is this girl?" Claire asked, her voice laced with controlled disapproval. "Claire, this is Sophia. She's a friend of Isabella's," Edward replied, choosing his words carefully. "I thought they could play together today." "Mom, look how much Sophia looks like me," Isabella exclaimed, pulling Sophia closer. "Even the little star on her ear is the same." Claire's face went visibly pale. She looked from one girl to the other, her expression shifting from surprise to something close to terror. Her hands trembled slightly before she hid them behind her back. What an interesting coincidence," Claire stammered, avoiding Edward's gaze. "But Edward, don't you think you should have warned me? The girl she needs a bath." "Of course," Edward replied, watching his wife's reaction closely. "Sophia, how about a nice warm bath? Claire can lend you some of Isabella's clothes." "I'll handle it," Claire said quickly, her voice still unsteady. I'll get everything ready." Indeed, as Claire hurried away, Edward noticed how she avoided looking directly at Sophia. There was something in her reaction that wasn't just surprise or social discomfort. It was fear. "Daddy Edward," Sophia called out, using for the first time the "aka" term Isabella always used. "Can I ask a question?" "Of course, sweetheart. Why was your wife scared of me?" The question hit Edward like a lightning bolt. The child's perception was stunning. Why do you think she was scared? "She went pale, like my grandma did when she told ghost stories," Sophia explained simply. "And she couldn't stop looking at me, but she pretended she wasn't." Edward knelt, again studying Sophia's face. "You're a very smart girl, aren't you? Grandma always said I was special, that I saw things other people didn't." Sophia fiddled with the hem of her shirt. "She said I had a gift, but that I had to be careful with it." "What kind of gift?" "I know when people are lying," Sophia answered matter-of-factly. "And your wife was lying when she said we look alike by coincidence. She knows something about me, doesn't she?" Edward felt the world spin. The child's intuition was terrifying. "Sophia, why didn't you ever tell me this before?" "Because you never asked, and because I knew that when the time was right you would understand." Sophia smiled, with a wisdom that didn't match her age. "Grandma always said everything happens at the right time." Isabella, who had been listening to the conversation in silence, approached Sophia. "I feel strange things sometimes too, especially when I'm here at home." "What kind of things?" Edward asked, his voice tense. "Sometimes I dream about another girl who looks just like me. She's always crying and calls me sister," Isabella revealed, her large eyes fixed on her father. "I always wake up sad, but I never understood why." Edward felt his legs give way. Two correlated dreams. Two identical children who felt connected. His rational mind fought against evidence that defied any logical explanation. "Daddy," Isabella continued, "are you sure I don't have a sister?" The question echoed through the mansion like a cry for help. Edward looked at the two girls, one raised in luxury, the other in misery, but both carrying the same essence, the same divided soul. He knew the time had come to find the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Night fell on the Morgan estate, bringing with it a palpable tension that spread through the halls like a dense fog. Edward remained awake in his study, watching through the window as the two girls slept peacefully in Isabella's room. Even in sleep, they held identical postures, as if they were reflections of each other. During dinner, the coincidences had multiplied alarmingly. Sophia knew the house as if she had lived there. She knew where the bathroom was without asking, instinctively headed to the kitchen when she was thirsty, and even recognized the taste of the food, claiming it tasted like home. "Edward, we need to talk," Claire said, entering the study with a tense face. She had avoided being alone with him all day, but now seemed determined to face the situation. "Yes, we do," Edward replied, turning to face her, "especially about your reaction when you saw Sophia." "What reaction?" Claire tried to sound casual, but her voice betrayed her nervousness. "I was just surprised. Anyone would be." "Claire, you turned pale as if you'd seen a ghost, and you've been avoiding looking directly at the girl ever since." Edward moved closer to his wife. "Is there something you're not telling me?" Claire looked away, pacing nervously around the room. "You're imagining things, Edward. The resemblance is just a coincidence. There are thousands of children who look alike." "With an identical birthmark in the same spot?" Edward questioned, his voice rising in intensity. "Claire, they're practically twins." "Twins?" Claire repeated the word as if it were a curse. "Edward, you're delusional. Isabella is our daughter, our only daughter. Then explain to me why Sophia knows our house, why she knew where the bathroom was, why she said the food tasted like home." Edward listed the evidence, watching as Claire grew paler and paler. They're coincidences," Claire murmured, but her conviction was fading. "And Isabella's dreams. She dreams of a sister who cries. How do you explain that?" Claire stopped pacing abruptly. "What dreams? You didn't know?" Edward studied his wife's expression. "Isabella has recurring dreams about a girl identical to her who calls her sister. Dreams that leave her sad and confused." That's just a child's imagination," Claire tried to argue, but her voice was breaking. "Claire, I need to know the truth about Isabella's birth." Edward stood before his wife, forcing her to look at him. "I need to know exactly what happened that day." "You were there, Edward. You know what happened," Claire exploded, her emotions finally spilling over. "Why are you torturing me with these questions?" "Because you're lying," Edward answered firmly, "and Sophia noticed it. She has a special gift. She knows when people are lying." Claire recoiled as if she'd been struck. "A gift? Edward, are you listening to yourself? You're believing a street child?" "I'm believing what my eyes see," Edward retorted. "Two identical children, one raised in luxury and the other in misery. One who knows our house without ever having been here, and another who dreams of a lost sister. Even if there was some explanation," Claire said, her voice now almost a whisper. "Why do you insist on dredging up the past? Our family is fine, Isabella is fine. Why risk our happiness? Because if Sophia is truly my daughter, she shouldn't be living on the street," Edward replied with determination. "She should be here with us, being raised with the love every child deserves." "And what if discovering the truth destroys our family?" Claire asked, tears welling in her eyes. "What if what you find is worse than you can imagine?" "What truth, Claire?" Edward held his wife's shoulders. "What truth could be so terrible?" Claire broke free and walked to the window, watching the two girls sleeping in the room above. There are things that are better left buried, Edward. Things that can hurt innocent people. Innocent people like Sophia, who grew up abandoned on the street, Edward questioned. Or innocent people like Isabella, who feels in her heart that something is missing from her life. You don't understand, Claire whispered, her voice filled with pain. You don't understand what could happen if certain people find out that Sophia is still alive. The phrase slipped out before Claire could stop herself. Edward felt his blood run cold. Still alive? He repeated slowly. Claire, what do you mean by still alive? The silence that followed Edward's question was deafening. Claire remained motionless at the window, her shoulders trembling like leaves in the wind. Edward could see the reflection of his wife's face in the glass, an expression of pure panic that confirmed his worst suspicions. Claire, Edward said, his voice dangerously low. Explain to me right now what you meant by still alive. I didn't mean anything. Claire tried to deflect, but her voice was broken. It was just a figure of speech. Don't lie to me! Edward exploded, his patience finally snapping. Not after everything I saw today. Was Sophia supposed to be dead? Is that it? Claire turned slowly, her face bathed in tears. Edward, please, don't do this. Don't dig up the past. Some truths are too dangerous. Dangerous for whom? Edward stepped closer, his determination growing with every word. For you, for me, or for whoever orchestrated this lie? For all of us, Claire whispered, especially for the girls. Edward felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. The girls are in danger. If certain people find out that Sophia didn't die as planned. Claire stopped, realizing she had said too much again. As planned, Edward repeated, his voice icy. Claire, are you telling me someone planned for Sophia to die? No, Claire answered quickly. Not for her to die, just for her to disappear. To be raised far away from here, far away from us. Why? Edward yelled, losing control completely. Why should my daughter be raised away from me? Because you weren't supposed to have two daughters, Claire burst out, finally caving to the pressure. Because twins would complicate everything, because your mother said. Claire cut herself off abruptly, covering her mouth with her hands, but it was too late. My mother? Edward felt the world crumble around him. My mother knew? Edward, please. My mother knew, Edward repeated, his voice echoing through the mansion. She knew I had two daughters and decided that one of them had to disappear. She said it was for the good of the family, Claire cried. That twins would bring complications for the inheritance, for the business. That one child was perfect, but two would create problems. And you agreed. Edward looked at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. You agreed to separate my daughters. I was vulnerable. I had just given birth. I was confused, traumatized. Claire defended herself desperately. Your mother said it was the best solution, that the girl would be well taken care of, that she would have a good life. A good life? Edward laughed bitterly. She was living under a bridge, Claire. Under a bridge. It wasn't supposed to be like that, Claire sobbed. Helen assured me the child would be well cared for, that the woman who took her would give her a decent life. But you never checked, did you? Edward accused. You never cared to find out if my daughter was really okay. I couldn't. Your mother forbade any contact. She said it would be dangerous for all of us if the truth came out. Edward stepped away from Claire, feeling nauseous. My own mother, my own wife, you conspired to steal my daughter from me. It wasn't theft, Claire tried to argue. It was a difficult decision made for the love of the family. Love? Edward laughed humorlessly. You call this love? Condemning an innocent child to misery to protect an inheritance? Edward, you have to understand. Your mother has so much power, so much influence. She said if the truth came out, it could destroy everything you've built. And she's right, Edward said, his voice now frighteningly calm. This is going to destroy everything. but not in the way she imagined. What do you mean? I mean, I'm going to find out the whole truth, every sordid detail of this conspiracy. Edward headed for the door. And then I'm going to make sure Sophia gets everything that was stolen from her. Edward, wait! Claire ran after him. You can't confront your mother. She's capable of... Capable of what? Edward turned abruptly. Making Sophia disappear again, threatening my family? Yes, Claire whispered. Exactly that. Edward felt a chill in his spine. Then she's even more dangerous than I imagined. Edward, please think of the girls. If you stir this up, you could put us all at risk. The girls are already at risk, Edward replied. One of them spent 7 years living on the street because my mother decided she didn't deserve a family. That ends now. Where are you going? To talk to my mother, Edward said, his determination unshakable. And this time, she's going to tell me the whole truth. Edward, no! Claire yelled. But he was already gone, leaving her alone with the weight of her secrets and the terror of what might happen when the truth finally came to light. The mansion of Helen Morgan stood imposing in the pre-dawn hours, its lit windows suggesting the family matriarch was still awake. Edward parked the car with trembling hands, not from fear, but from a cold rage he had never felt before. At 72, his mother maintained an iron grip on the family business, and apparently on decisions that should have been his alone. The maid who opened the door seemed surprised to see him at that hour. Mr. Edward, Mom is in her office, but she's not, expecting visitors. Don't worry, Mercedes, Edward said, striding past the woman. She'll see me. Helen was sitting behind her mahogany desk, examining documents with the same precision she applied to everything in her life. Her grey hair was impeccably styled, even at this hour, and her navy silk robe radiated elegance and authority. She looked up as Edward entered without knocking. Edward, she said, her voice maintaining its usual coolness. What a surprise! It's 2 a.m. We need to talk, Mother. Edward closed the door behind him, locking it. About Sophia. Helen showed no reaction to the name. She continued organizing her papers with precise movements, as if her son had mentioned the weather. I don't know any Sophia, she replied calmly. The girl you had delivered to a poor woman 7 years ago, Edward continued, approaching the desk. My daughter, your granddaughter. You're delusional, Edward. You have only one daughter, Isabella. Stop lying! Edward slammed his hand on the desk, sending papers flying. Claire told me everything. Helen finally looked up, and Edward saw in her eyes a coldness that chilled him to the bone. Claire is hysterical. Women get that way under pressure. So you admit you know what I'm talking about? I admit nothing. Helen rose, walking to the window. But if you insist on dredging up the past, then let's talk like civilized people. Edward felt he was about to hear something terrible. I'm listening. You were born to inherit an empire, Edward, to continue a legacy I built with blood and sweat. Helen spoke without turning around. That empire requires order, precision, total control. And 2 granddaughters would threaten that control. Twins create complications, inheritance disputes, rivalries, divisions of power. Helen turned, her expression glacial. 1 heiress is perfect, 2 are a problem. So you decided one of them had to disappear. I decided one of them should have a different life, away from the responsibilities and pressures of this family. Living in misery, Edward yelled. She was living under a bridge. That wasn't part of the plan, Helen answered coldly. The woman who was supposed to care for her failed in her duties. And you never checked? You never cared about the well-being of your own granddaughter? I cared about the well-being of the family as a whole, Helen replied. including your well-being, Edward. Do you think you would have been happy dividing your attention between two identical daughters, splitting your inheritance, dealing with the legal complications? That decision wasn't yours to make. Edward approached his mother, his eyes blazing with rage. You had no right to decide the fate of my daughters. I had the right to protect my family, Helen answered, her tone hardening. And I have the right to continue protecting it. What does that mean? It means you should have left things as they were. The girl was being looked after. You had a perfect family. Why complicate things? Because she's my daughter, Edward shouted. Because she deserves love, care, a real family. And now that you've found out, what do you intend to do? Helen asked, her voice laced with a challenge. Bring her home. Explain to your business partners, to society, to the press, how a second daughter magically appeared. Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Even knowing it could destroy everything we've built, even knowing it could lead to investigations, questions about the legality of Isabella's adoption. Edward felt his blood run cold. What do you mean? I mean that when you mess with the past, you sometimes find things you'd rather not know. Helen smiled coldly. Are you sure you want to know the whole truth about how your daughters were born? What truth? The truth about why it was so easy to separate the twins, the truth about what really happened at the hospital that night. Helen moved closer to her son. The truth about who these children's biological parents really are. Edward felt the world spin. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you keep digging, you might find that neither you nor Claire are the biological parents of either of them. The revelation hit Edward like a physical blow. He staggered, grabbing the desk to keep from falling. Impossible, he whispered. Nothing is impossible when you have enough money and influence, Helen answered. The question is, do you really want to know where these children came from? Edward remained motionless for long minutes, trying to process his mother's words. The possibility that neither he nor Claire were the twins' biological parents was something his mind refused to accept. He clearly remembered Claire's pregnancy, the morning sickness, the doctor's appointments, her growing belly. You're lying, Edward said finally, his voice hoarse. I saw Claire pregnant for 9 months. Yes, you did, Helen confirmed, returning to her chair. Claire was indeed pregnant, but the baby she was carrying died during childbirth. Edward felt as if the floor had vanished from beneath his feet. What? Complications with the umbilical cord. The baby was stillborn. Helen spoke with the same coldness she used to discuss business deals. Claire was distraught. You were devastated. I made a decision. What decision? Edward whispered. There was a young, single mother in the same hospital, very poor, very young, with newborn twin girls and no way to raise them. She was willing to give the children up for adoption. No. Edward shook his head. No, that's impossible. I paid handsomely for the transaction. The young mother received enough money to start a new life in another country. You received a healthy daughter. Everyone won. And the other twin? The other twin was a problem. 2 identical children would lead to questions, investigations, so I arranged for her to be raised discreetly by a trustworthy woman. Edward sat down heavily in the chair opposite the desk. You're telling me that, Isabella and Sophia are not my biological daughters? Biologically, no, but in every other way that matters, they are your daughters. You love them. They love you. What difference does it make where they came from? What difference does it make? Edward exploded. You built our entire family on a lie. I saved your family, Helen retorted. Claire was falling into a deep depression after losing the baby. You were destroying yourself with guilt and grief. I offered a solution that brought happiness to everyone. Except for the girl's biological mother. Except for Sophia, who grew up in misery. The biological mother was a 16-year-old girl who couldn't afford to raise one child, let alone two. She made the right choice. Choice? Edward laughed bitterly. Or was she coerced by your influence and your money? She signed all the lay papers voluntarily. I have everything documented. Helen remained silent, letting the magnitude of the revelation sink in. His entire life was a carefully constructed lie. His fatherhood, his family, even his grief, all had been manipulated by his mother. "Where is the biological mother now?" he asked. "She died 3 years ago. Cancer." Helen answered without emotion. She never tried to make contact, never questioned the decision. She lived a quiet life in Europe with the money she received. "So, there's no way to confirm your story." "There are documents, medical records, proof of payment." Helen opened a drawer and pulled out a file, all meticulously archived. Edward stared at the file as if it were a venomous snake. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you need to understand the consequences of your actions. If you bring Sophia home, if you make this a public case, this information will come out." Helen leaned forward. "Are you prepared to explain how you found a second daughter? How she is genetically identical to the first?" "I'll tell the truth. The truth is that you and Claire are not the biological parents of either girl. The truth is that your entire fatherhood is based on fraudulent documents. The truth is you could lose both girls to social services." Terror seized Edward's chest. "You wouldn't." "I wouldn't have to do anything, just allow the truth to come out." Helen smiled coldly. "Or you can forget Sophia, leave things as they are, and continue being a loving father to Isabella. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a choice: protection for the family you have, or destruction for everyone in the pursuit of an impossible justice." Edward looked at the file in his hands. Inside was the truth that could destroy everything he held real. But it was also proof that Sophia was his daughter, perhaps not by blood, but in every way that truly mattered. "There's a third option," Edward said slowly. "Which is? I take Sophia home and you keep your mouth shut. Forever." Helen laughed. "And why would I do that?" "Because if you try to destroy me, I will destroy you first. Document fraud, child trafficking, blackmail. I'm sure I can find enough evidence to put you in prison." "You don't have the courage. Try me." Edward stood up, taking the file. "My daughter Sophia is coming home tomorrow. And if anything happens to her or to me or to any member of my family, these documents go straight to the police and the press." "Edward, don't underestimate me, Mother. You taught me how to play dirty far too well." Edward left the mansion knowing he had just declared war on his own mother, but he also knew there was no other choice. Sophia deserved a family, and he would do anything to give her one. Edward arrived home as the sun was beginning to rise, finding Claire sitting in the living room, still in her robe from the night before. Her eyes were red and swollen from a sleepless night. She looked up as he entered, and the panic on her face intensified when she saw the file in his hands. "Edward," she whispered, "where have you been?" "Talking to my mother," he answered, placing the file on the coffee table. "Finding out the whole truth." Claire stared at the file as if it were a bomb about to detonate. "What truth?" "The truth about our baby, who died at birth. The truth about the twins' biological mother. The truth about how our family was built on lies." Edward sat down across from his wife. "You knew everything, didn't you?" Claire broke down in tears. "Edward, I was shattered. I lost our baby. I was in a deep depression. Your mother said it was the only solution. You knew Sophia was alive. You knew she was suffering on the street while we raised Isabella in luxury. Your mother forbade me from looking. She said it would be dangerous for all of us." Claire reached out to touch Edward, but he pulled away. "I tried to forget. I tried to focus on being a good mother to Isabella. And you managed to forget for 7 years that there was another child. No, Claire cried out. I never forgot. Do you think it was easy for me? Every night I wondered if she was okay, if she was hungry, if she was safe. But you never did anything to find out. Because I was scared. Scared that if I looked, I would lose Isabella too. Claire stood up, pacing nervously. Your mother made it very clear that if I made a move, she would make sure we lost everything. Well, she doesn't have that power anymore. Edward opened the file, revealing documents and photographs. I have enough evidence to destroy her if she tries to harm us. Edward, you don't understand. Helen has connections that go beyond what you can imagine. She can make our family disappear if she wants to. So what do you suggest? We leave Sophia on the street forever? No, Claire said quickly, just that we be careful, that we find a way to help her without exposing the truth. Claire, she is our daughter. It doesn't matter if we don't share DNA. She's our daughter just as much as Isabella is. I know. Claire sat beside him. But what if we bring Sophia home and someone investigates? What if they discover the fraud? We could lose both girls. Then we'll make sure that doesn't happen. Edward stood up. We're going to wake the girls and explain the situation. They deserve to know the truth. You're going to tell them we're not their biological parents. I'm going to tell them they're sisters and that they're going to stay together forever. Edward walked up the stairs. The rest can wait. In Isabella's room, the two girls were still asleep, side by side. Edward watched for a moment how identical they were, even in sleep. They were his daughters, regardless of biology or documents. He loved them with the same intensity he would love biological children. Girls, he said softly, wake up. We have something important to talk about. Sophia opened her eyes first, smiling immediately when she saw him. Good morning, Daddy Edward. Edward's heart clenched. She had started calling him Daddy naturally, as if she had always known he was her family. Good morning, sweetheart. Isabella, wake up too. The two girls sat up in bed, still sleepy but curious. Edward sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. Girls, you know you're very special, don't you? Because we're sisters, Sophia said cheerfully. Exactly. You're twin sisters who were separated when you were born. Edward took a deep breath. But now you've found each other, and I want Sophia to come live with us forever. Really? Sophia's eyes shone like stars. I can stay here with you? Yes, you can. This is your family, your home. But what if the mean lady doesn't like it? Sophia asked, her expression turning worried. What mean lady? Edward frowned. The elegant lady who sometimes shows up at the park and watches me from far away. She doesn't like me. She always looks angry when she sees me. Edward's blood ran cold. Sophia, have you seen this lady recently? Yesterday, when you brought me home. She was in a black car, watching. Sophia moved closer to him. Daddy Edward, she won't take us apart again, will she? Edward hugged both girls tightly. No, sweetheart. No one will ever separate you again. I promise. But even as he made the promise, Edward knew his mother wouldn't give up easily. She had spent 7 years keeping Sophia away, and now that her plans were being destroyed, she would be capable of anything. Girls, from now on, you don't leave the house without me or Mommy Claire, okay? Why? Isabella asked. Because there are people who might try to hurt our family. But I'm going to protect you. Sophia took Edward's hand. Daddy Edward, I know you'll protect us. I always knew you were my real dad. The girl's words touched Edward deeply. Regardless of biology or circumstance, the love between them was real and pure. Now he had to make sure nothing and no one destroyed his family again. The following days passed in an atmosphere of tension disguised as normalcy. Edward had discreetly hired a security firm for the estate, installing cameras at all entry points and hiring 2 guards who rotated in shifts. Officially, they were routine precautions for a wealthy family. In reality, they were measures of protection against his own mother. Sophia adapted to her new life with a readiness that surprised everyone. It was as if she had always belonged in that luxurious environment. She instinctively knew where rooms were, how to use the kitchen utensils, and even recognized some of the family portraits hanging on the walls. "Daddy Edward," she said during breakfast, "why is there a picture of me in the hallway?" Edward nearly choked on his coffee. "What picture, sweetheart?" "That little one, in the gold frame. I'm wearing a white dress." Sophia drank her orange juice. "But I don't remember taking that picture." Claire and Edward exchanged a look. It was a photo of Isabella as a baby, taken on her first birthday. The resemblance was so perfect that Sophia believed it was her. "That's a picture of Isabella when she was a baby," Edward explained gently. "But you two look so much alike. It really does look like you." "Oh," Sophia nodded, as if it were the most natural explanation in the world. "Mommy Claire, can I have a picture of me too?" Claire was moved by the request. "Of course, sweetheart. Today we'll take lots of pictures of you." "Of us," Isabella corrected. "We'll take pictures of us because now we're a whole family." Edward smiled, watching how the 2 girls naturally completed each other's sentences. They had developed their own language, full of meaningful looks and synchronized gestures. It was as if they were making up for 7 lost years of togetherness. It was while Edward was working in his home office that the phone rang. It was an unknown number, but he answered as a precaution. "Hello? Edward." His mother's voice was glacial. "We need to meet." "We have nothing to talk about, Mother." "Yes, we do, especially about the girl's safety." A chill ran down Edward's spine. "What kind of safety?" "The kind you can't guarantee alone. Meet me at the cafe on Maple Street in an hour." "I'm not leaving the girls alone." "Then bring Claire with you." "But come." The line went dead. Edward stared at the phone, feeling he was being manipulated again. But the mention of the girl's safety worried him. He called Claire and explained the situation. "It could be a trap," Claire said nervously. "It could be, but I can't ignore it if she knows about a real threat." Edward looked out the window, watching the twins play in the garden under the supervision of one of the guards. "We'll take the girls. I'm not leaving them." An hour later, the family was gathered at the elegant cafe Helen had chosen. It was a public place, which partially reassured Edward. His mother was already sitting at a discreet table in the back, impeccably dressed as always. "Grandma Helen!" Isabella ran to hug her, followed hesitantly by Sophia. "Hello, Isabella," Helen said, returning her granddaughter's hug. But when Sophia approached, she watched her with an expression Edward couldn't decipher. "Grandma, this is my sister Sophia," Isabella said proudly. "She lives with us now." "Hello, Sophia," Helen said, her voice carefully neutral. "You're being well cared for, I see." "Yes, Mum. Daddy Edward and Mommy Claire are very good to me." Edward watched the interaction closely. His mother studied Sophia with the same clinical gaze she used to evaluate investments. There was something calculating in her expression that made him uncomfortable. "Girls, how about you get some ice cream?" Helen suggested, handing Isabella some money. "You can go up to the counter." When the children moved away, Helen turned to Edward and Claire. "You've made a grave mistake." "Taking care of my daughter is not a mistake," Edward retorted. "Exposing the situation this way is." Helen leaned forward. "People are already asking questions. Private investigators, curious journalists. The story of a found second daughter is attracting attention." "What kind of attention?" Claire asked, worried. "The kind that can lead to official investigations, DNA analysis, document reviews, questions about the legality of the adoption." Helen paused. "You're playing with fire. So what do you suggest?" Edward asked, though he feared the answer. That Sophia disappears again, this time permanently? Never, Edward said firmly. Then prepare for the consequences. Helen stood up. Because when the truth comes out, you will lose both girls. Grandma, you're not leaving, are you? Isabella had returned with Sophia, both holding ice cream cones. No, dear. I was just finishing a conversation with your parents. Helen kissed Isabella's forehead, but avoided touching Sophia. Take good care of your sister. After Helen left, Edward noticed that Sophia was too quiet. She was staring intently at the door where the woman had exited. Sophia, are you okay? Daddy Edward, she said slowly. Grandma Helen doesn't like me. Why do you say that? Because she was thinking bad things. I can feel it when people are thinking about hurting other people. Sophia looked at him with her big, frightened eyes. She wants me to disappear again. Edward felt a shiver. Sophia's intuition was frighteningly accurate. Don't worry, sweetheart. I will never let that happen. But even as he comforted the girl, Edward knew his mother wasn't bluffing. She was truly capable of making Sophia disappear, and this time it could be for good. The following week brought a series of events that confirmed Edward's worst fears. First, a call from Isabella's school principal asking about rumors of a second daughter. Then a journalist showed up at his company's doorstep asking questions about changes to the Morgan family structure. Edward knew his mother was behind every move. She had promised consequences, and now she was delivering, on her word, with the surgical precision that had always defined her. Edward, I'm scared, Claire said at dinner, watching the twins play in the adjacent room. A neighbor asked me about Sophia today, said she'd heard she was recently adopted. My mother is spreading rumors to force our hand, Edward replied, trying to stay calm. She wants us to panic. Maybe we should consider sending Sophia to a boarding school, Claire suggested hesitantly. Just temporarily, until things calm down. No. Edward was firm. I won't separate the girls again. We've already lost 7 years. But what if we lose them both because of our stubbornness? We're not going to lose anyone. Edward stood up, watching his daughters through the doorway. I'm going to hire the best lawyers in the country. We're going to legalize Sophia's situation officially. With what documents? All the paperwork is fraudulent. Then we'll get real documents, an official adoption, a recognition of paternity, whatever it takes. Claire gripped her husband's arm. Edward, you don't understand. Your mother has influence over judges, clerks, government agencies. She can torpedo any legal attempt. Then we'll go to another state, another country if we have to. Edward turned to his wife. Claire, those girls are our family. I'm not abandoning Sophia again. Daddy Edward, Sophia appeared at the kitchen door. Can I talk to you? Of course, sweetheart. What is it? Sophia came closer, her large eyes showing a seriousness that didn't match her age. I heard you talking. You're worried about me. No, Sophia, we're just... Daddy Edward, I know when people are lying, remember? Sophia took his hand. You're afraid I'll bring trouble to the family. Edward knelt to her level. Sophia, you don't bring trouble. You're a part of our family. But some people don't want me to be, Sophia said sadly. Grandma Helen, for example. How do you know that? Because she sent men to watch me. Sophia glanced out the window. There's a black car parked on the street. It's been there for 3 days. The men inside take pictures of the house. Edward's blood ran cold. He rushed to the window and saw the car Sophia had mentioned. 2 men were inside, and one was indeed holding a camera with a telephoto lens. Claire, call security, Edward ordered. Now, Daddy Edward, Sophia tugged at his shirt. There's more. What else? Yesterday, when Isabella and I were playing in the garden, a man tried to climb the wall. The guard sent him away, but he said he'd be back. Panic began to rise in Edward's chest. His mother wasn't just spreading rumors, she was preparing something far more serious. "Sophia, did you tell anyone about this?" "Only Isabella, but she got scared and said we shouldn't tell you." "Why shouldn't you tell us?" "Because Isabella thinks that if you know it's dangerous to have me here, you'll send me away again." Edward hugged Sophia tightly. "Sweetheart, listen to me. No matter what happens, I will never send you away. You're my daughter, and I will protect you. Even if it's dangerous for everyone?" "Even then." Sophia smiled, but her eyes remained worried. "Daddy Edward, I have an idea." "What idea?" "What if I talk to Grandma Helen? What if I explain to her that I don't want to cause trouble?" "No," Edward answered quickly. "Sophia, you must not go near Grandma Helen. She can be dangerous. But she's family too. Maybe she's just scared like Mommy Claire was. No, Sophia, promise me you won't try to talk to her." "I promise," Sophia said, but Edward saw something in her gaze that made him uneasy. That night, after the girls were asleep, Edward met with his security team. The report was alarming. Besides the car on the street, there were signs the house was being monitored from multiple angles. Someone had attempted to hack the security system, and there were suspicious footprints in the garden. "Mr. Morgan," said the head of security, "I recommend the family be moved to a more secure location temporarily." "I'm not leaving my house," Edward replied, "but double the security, and if anyone tries to get near the girls, intervene immediately." "Understood, sir." As Edward went up to bed, he looked into the twins' room. They slept peacefully, side by side, oblivious to the danger surrounding them. He knew his mother was planning something drastic, and that time was running out. But what Edward didn't know was that Sophia had lied about her promise, and she was already planning a visit to Grandma Helen. The next morning, Edward woke with a sense of unease he couldn't explain. Breakfast went on as usual, with the twins chatting excitedly about the books they had read the night before. But something in Sophia's behavior kept him on alert. She was too quiet, lost in thoughts that seemed too deep for a 7-year-old. "Sophia, are you okay?" Edward asked, pouring her some orange juice. "I'm fine, Daddy Edward, just thinking." "Thinking about what?" "About how to make our family safe forever." Sophia smiled, but her eyes held that peculiar seriousness. "Sometimes kids can solve problems that adults can't." Edward exchanged a worried look with Claire. "Sophia, I've already told you that you don't need to worry about these things. Mommy and I will take care of everything." "I know, Daddy Edward, but I want to help too." After breakfast, Edward went to his office to work, but he couldn't concentrate. He called the head of security to check if there had been any developments during the night. "Nothing unusual, Mr. Morgan. The perimeter is secure." "And the girls?" "They're playing in the garden, under Mrs. Morgan's and the guard Johnson's supervision." Edward felt a little calmer, but the feeling that something was wrong persisted. That's when his cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" "Edward, it's Mercedes, your mother's housekeeper." The woman's voice was tense. "I need to speak with you urgently." "Mercedes, what happened?" "Your mother? She's planning something terrible, something involving the girl, Sophia." Edward's heart raced. "What do you mean?" "She's hired men, very dangerous men. They're coming to your house this afternoon." "What men?" "I don't know exactly, but I overheard her on the phone. She said the Sophia problem would be solved permanently." Mercedes paused. "Mr. Morgan, your mother has lost her mind. She's willing to do anything." "Where are you now?" "I left her house. I can't be an accomplice to this anymore." Mercedes was crying. "Mr. Morgan, get your family out of there. Go far away, today." The call disconnected. Edward was paralyzed for a few seconds, then ran to the garden. Claire was sitting on a bench reading a book, but the girls were nowhere in sight. "Claire, where are the girls?" "They went to get Sophia's doll from their room." "Why? You look pale." "We have to get out of here now." Edward ran up to the twins' room, but it was empty. "Sophia, Isabella! Daddy Edward!" Isabella came running from the bathroom. "What's wrong?" "Where's Sophia?" "She said she was going to get something from the garden, that she'd be right back." Edward ran to the garden, followed by Claire and Isabella. The guard, Johnson, was at his post, but Sophia was nowhere to be found. "Johnson, where is Sophia?" "She was here 5 minutes ago, sir, playing with her dolls." Edward searched the entire garden, calling the girl's name. It was then that he saw a note pinned to a rosebush, written in Sophia's childish handwriting. "Daddy, Edward, I went to talk to Grandma Helen, don't worry. I'm going to explain to her that I don't want to cause trouble for our family. I'll be back soon. I love you, Sophia." "No!" Edward yelled, crumpling the note. "She went to my mother's." "Edward, what's happening?" Claire asked, desperate. "My mother hired men to do something to Sophia, and she walked right into her house." Edward was already calling his head of security. "Get all the men together. We're going to my mother's house. Now." "Daddy, I want to come with you!" Isabella shouted, realizing the gravity of the situation. "No, sweetheart. You stay here with Mommy Claire and the security team." "I'm not staying. Sophia is my sister." Edward looked at the determination in Isabella's face and recognized the same courage Sophia had shown. "All right, but you stay in the car, no matter what happens." During the drive to Helen's estate, Edward called the police, but he knew they would arrive too late. His mother had influence over many local officers, and there was a good chance his call would be delayed at dispatch. "Mr. Morgan," the head of security said, "your mother's house is surrounded by armed men. These aren't normal security guards." "How many?" "At least 6 that we can see. There could be more." Edward felt desperation welling in his chest. Sophia had walked straight into a trap, driven by innocence and the desire to protect her family. "Daddy Edward," Isabella held his hand. "Sophia will be okay. She's very smart." "I know, sweetheart. But sometimes being smart isn't enough." When they arrived at the estate, Edward saw that all the windows were shut, and an ominous silence hung in the air. No movement, no sound. It was as if the house were empty. Mr. Morgan, the head of security, pointed to the back garden. "There's a black car leaving through the side gate. They're driving very fast." Edward felt his world collapse. "They've taken Sophia." "Daddy, we have to save her," Isabella cried, tears streaming down her face. "We will, sweetheart. We'll save your sister." But even as he said it, Edward knew his mother had made her final move. Sophia had disappeared, and this time he didn't know if he could find her in time. Edward spent the next 4 hours in total despair, mobilizing every available resource to find Sophia. He had contacted private investigators, offered astronomical rewards, and even tried to blackmail some of his mother's associates. But Helen had disappeared along with Sophia, and no one knew where they were. Mr. Morgan, the head of security, entered the study. "We've managed to track the black car. It was last seen heading towards your mother's country estate, 2 hours from the city." Edward felt a mix of relief and terror. The estate was isolated, surrounded by miles of dense woods. It was the perfect place for someone to disappear forever. "How many men do we have available?" 12, sir, all armed and trained." "It won't be enough." Edward picked up the phone. "I'm calling the FBI. My mother may have local influence, but not national." "Daddy Edward." Isabella appeared at the door, her eyes red from crying. "Are you going to bring Sophia back?" "I will, sweetheart, I promise. I want to go with you." "No, Isabella, it's too dangerous." "Sophia is my sister," Isabella shouted. "She went to save our family. Now I want to save her." Edward looked at the determination in his daughter's face and realized she had inherited the same courage Sophia displayed. "All right, but you stay in the car no matter what happens." During the drive to the estate, Edward called his mother several times, but every call went straight to voicemail. He left several messages alternating between pleas and threats. "Mother, if you hurt Sophia, I will destroy you. No matter what happens to me, I will make sure you pay for this." When they arrived at the estate, Edward saw that the place was more fortified than he had imagined. There were armed men in strategic positions, and all entrances seemed to be blocked. Mr. Morgan, the head of security, pointed to the main house. "There's movement in the second-floor windows. Someone is up there." Edward grabbed the binoculars and saw a small figure in one of the windows. It was Sophia, and she seemed to be trying to signal something. "She's alive," Edward sighed in relief. "I have to get to her." "Sir, it's suicide. They have the numbers and the high ground. Then we'll use the only advantage we have." Edward turned to Isabella. "Sweetheart, do you remember how Sophia always said you two were connected?" "Yes, Daddy. Sometimes I feel what she's feeling." "Are you feeling anything now?" Isabella closed her eyes, concentrating. "She's scared, but she's not hurt, and she's trying to tell us something." "What?" "She wants you to go to the house alone. She says Grandma Helen will only talk to you." Edward hesitated. It was obviously a trap, but it might be his only chance to save Sophia. "All right," Edward addressed his security team. "You all stay here. If I'm not out in 1 hour, call the FBI and storm the house." "Mr. Morgan, this is insane." "Maybe it is, but that's my daughter in there." Edward walked slowly towards the house, keeping his hands visible. The armed men watched him, but no one fired. The front door opened before he reached it. "Edward," his mother appeared in the doorway, elegantly dressed as always. "You came. Where is Sophia?" "She's safe, for now." Helen stepped aside, allowing him to enter. "Come, let's settle this once and for all." Edward entered the house, noting at least 4 armed men in the living room. His mother led him to the library, where a table was prepared with documents. "Sit down, Edward. I'm not sitting down until I see Sophia." "You'll see her after you sign these papers." Helen pointed to the documents. "It's a declaration acknowledging that Sophia is not your daughter and that you relinquish any and all claim to her." "Never." "Then she will disappear, permanently." "You wouldn't do that. She's your granddaughter. She is a problem that needs to be solved." Helen stepped closer. "Edward, you still have Isabella, a perfect daughter, a stable family. Why risk it all for a child who has brought nothing but trouble?" "Because I love her. Because she is my daughter." "She is not," Helen exploded. "You know she's not. She's the daughter of some nobody who sold her children for cash. That doesn't matter. She's my daughter in my heart." "Sentimentality doesn't build empires, Edward." "Daddy, Edward!" Sophia's voice echoed through the house. "I'm here!" Edward looked up and saw Sophia on the staircase, held by a large man. She looked frightened but not injured. "Sophia, are you okay?" "I am, Daddy, but Grandma Helen is very sad. She needs help." "Shut up, girl," the man holding her said rudely. A murderous fury rose in Edward's chest. "Take your hands off my daughter." "Or what?" the man laughed. "Or you'll find out just how far a father will go to protect his child." "Edward," Helen interrupted, "sign the papers. It's the only way we all get out of here alive." "Daddy, Edward," Sophia cried out, "don't sign. Grandma Helen is lying. She needs you, not for me to be away." Edward looked at the 7-year-old girl who was showing more wisdom than many adults. "What do you mean, Sophia?" "She's afraid of dying alone. She wants you to forgive her, but she doesn't know how to ask." Helen went pale. "Don't listen to this child. She's delusional." "No, Mother," Edward said, staring at her intently. "For the first time, someone is telling the truth in this house." The silence that followed Edward's words was heavy with emotion. Helen remained motionless. as if Sophia's words had pierced armor she had worn for decades. Her eyes, always so cold and calculating, shimmered with unshed tears. "Grandma Helen," Sophia said gently, "can you let me go? I won't run. I want to talk to you." The man holding Sophia looked at Helen, confused. The matriarch nodded slowly, and he released the girl. Sophia walked calmly down the stairs as if she were in no danger at all. "Sophia, come back here," Edward yelled, but she shook her head. "It's okay, Daddy Edward. Grandma Helen isn't going to hurt me." Sophia approached Helen. "Can I hold your hand?" The simple question threw Helen off balance emotionally. She looked at Sophia's small, grimy hand, then at her own perfectly manicured fingers. For a moment, it seemed she would refuse, but then she extended her hand. "Grandma Helen," Sophia said, taking the woman's hand, "you're very sad on the inside. I can feel it. Don't be ridiculous, child. I don't get sad. Yes, you do. You're sad because you're afraid no one really loves you, that everyone only gets close because of your money." Helen tried to pull her hand away, but Sophia held it firmly. "You don't know anything about me." "Yes, I do. You lost your mother when you were little, just like I lost the grandma who took care of me. And you became afraid of losing more people, so you decided it was better not to love anyone." "How do you know that?" Helen whispered. "Because I felt the same way before I found my family." Sophia smiled. "But then I learned that loving people isn't dangerous. Being alone is what's dangerous." Edward watched the scene, fascinated. His 7-year-old daughter was doing something he had never managed in 42 years, reaching his mother's heart. "Grandma Helen," Sophia continued, "you think sending me away will protect your family. But the truth is, you're afraid to love me and then lose me." "That's not true," Helen said, but her voice was broken. "Yes, it is. You've loved me since you saw me in the park. That's why you sent your men to watch me. It wasn't to hurt me, it was to make sure I was safe." Edward was stunned. "Mother, is that true?" Helen finally broke. The tears she had held back for decades began to fall. I would see you feeding that child in the park, and every time I looked at her, I saw you when you were little. The same innocence, the same kindness. Then why did you try to take her from me?" "Because I knew if you found out the truth, you would hate me. I preferred to be the villain in the story rather than risk losing you completely." "No, but Grandma Helen," Sophia said, "love isn't about never losing people. It's about cherishing the time we have together." "You're very wise for a 7-year-old. The grandma who took care of me used to say that sometimes children understand love better than adults because we aren't afraid to show it." Helen knelt before Sophia, bringing herself to the girl's level. "Sophia, can you forgive me for what I did to you, for how I separated you from your family?" "I already have, Grandma." "Helen, but now you need to forgive yourself." "I don't know how. It starts by being a real grandma to me and to Isabella." "Isabella!" Edward exclaimed, remembering his daughter was waiting in the car. "I have to get her." "No need," a familiar voice said from the door. Isabella ran in, followed by the security team. "I couldn't stay in the car when I felt you were all working things out." "Isabella, how did you get here?" "Grandma Helen's men brought me. They said she wanted to apologize to the whole family." Edward looked at his mother, who was still holding Sophia's hands. "Mother, did you plan this?" "Not exactly. But when Sophia got here and started talking to me, I realized she was right. I was afraid to show love because I thought it would make me weak. And now I know I've wasted too much time being strong all by myself." Helen stood up, opening her arms to both her granddaughters. "Can I have a hug from my granddaughters?" Sophia and Isabella ran to embrace her. It was the first time Edward had ever seen his mother show genuine affection without calculation or ulterior motives. "Edward," Helen said, still hugging the girls. Can you forgive me too? Mother, I never stopped loving you. I just didn't agree with your methods. I know, and I promise I will change. I'll be the grandmother these girls deserve. Grandma. Helen, Sophia said, does this mean I can stay with my family forever? Yes, sweetheart, and more than that, I will ensure all the documents are legalized correctly. No more fraud or lies. And the armed men? Edward asked. They're already being dismissed. They were hired to protect, not to threaten. So can we go home? Isabella asked. We can, Edward replied. All of us, including Grandma Helen if she'd like. Helen smiled through her tears. I would like that very much. I have a lot of lost time to make up for. As they left the estate, Edward watched his two daughters run ahead hand in hand, finally free to be sisters. His mother walked beside him, more human and vulnerable than he had ever seen her. Edward, she said, thank you for not giving up on me, even when I didn't deserve it. That's what family is, Mother. We don't give up on each other. I understand that now, and I promise I'll spend the rest of my life being the family you all deserve. 6 months after that transformative encounter in the park, Edward walked along the same path where it all began. But this time, he wasn't alone. Isabella and Sophia ran ahead of him, their crystal-clear laughter echoing through the trees, while Helen followed them with a genuine smile that had become her trademark. "Daddy Edward!" Sophia shouted, stopping to wait for him. "Do you remember when I asked if you knew my sister?" "I remember it perfectly, sweetheart. It was the most important day of my life." "Mine too," Isabella added, taking her sister's hand, "because it was the day our family became whole." Helen approached, carrying a picnic basket. In the last few months, she had completely transformed. Where there was once calculating coldness, there was now human warmth. Where there was once manipulation, there was now genuine love. "Girls," she called, "how about we pick a nice spot for our lunch?" The twins ran off to explore the park, searching for the perfect location. Edward watched them move in perfect sync, like two parts of the same soul that had finally been reunited. "Edward," Helen said, approaching her son, "do you know I still surprise myself every day?" "With what, Mother?" "With how much I love these girls, with how much I love you." She paused, watching her granddaughters. "I spent my whole life thinking love was a weakness. Now I've discovered it's the only thing that really matters. You've changed a lot, Mother. Sophia taught me it's never too late to change, that it's never too late to choose love over fear." Edward smiled, remembering how his 7-year-old daughter had managed to touch the heart of one of the toughest women he had ever known. She really does have a special gift. They both do. Isabella taught me a lot too, about patience, about forgiveness, about giving second chances. "Grandma Helen," Sophia ran back, followed by Isabella. "We found the perfect spot. It's under the big tree near the lake." "Perfect," Helen replied. "Let's set up our picnic." As they laid out the blanket and arranged the food, Edward reflected on everything that had happened. Claire had divorced him after a few months, unable to cope with the emotional complexity of the situation. But surprisingly, she kept in touch with the girls, visiting them regularly and showing genuine affection for both. "Daddy Edward," Sophia said, sitting beside him, "are you thinking about Mommy Claire?" "How did you know?" "Because you make that face when you think about her. The face of someone who misses her, but also someone who understands." "You're right, sweetheart. I understand why she couldn't stay. Sometimes people need time to process big changes." "But she still loves us," Isabella added. "She said so when she visited last week." "Yes, she does, and we love her too. Family isn't just who you live with, it's who cares about you." "Like Grandma Helen," Sophia said, looking at her grandmother who was preparing sandwiches with motherly care. She used to live far away from our hearts, but now she lives right next to them." Helen looked up, moved. "Sophia, you always know exactly what to say. It's because I learned that the most important words are the ones that come from the heart." After lunch, the girls went to play on the playground while Edward and Helen talked. The sun filtered gently through the leaves, creating the same golden mosaic that had witnessed the impossible meeting months before. "Edward," Helen said, "you know I've legalized all the girls' documents." "Yes, Mother, thank you for that." "No need to thank me. It's the least I can do." She paused. "I've also set up an educational fund for other children in situations similar to Sophia's. I don't want any child to go through what she went through." "That's wonderful, Mother. The girls gave me a second chance to do the right thing. Now I want to use my influence to help other families." "Daddy Edward! Grandma Helen!" Sophia ran to them, followed by Isabella. "Look what we found!" She held a small, delicate wildflower. "It's for you, because you gave us the most beautiful family in the world." Edward accepted the flower, feeling tears of joy welling in his eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart. You gave us the most beautiful family in the world, too." "Grandma Helen," Isabella said, "do you want to have a sleepover at our house tonight? We can watch movies and eat popcorn." "I would love that, my granddaughter." As they returned home, Edward watched his transformed family. Helen held both girls' hands, telling them stories from his childhood. Sophia and Isabella laughed, completely connected not only to each other, but to their entire family. "Daddy Edward," Sophia said, "do you remember when I lived under the bridge?" "I do, sweetheart. Sometimes I felt like I had a family somewhere, that someone loved me even though I didn't know who." She smiled. "Now I know it was you all. You always loved me, even before you found me." "That's right, Sophia. True love doesn't need an address to exist. And now we have an address, a family, and love," Isabella added. "We have everything." "Yes, we do," Edward agreed, looking at the sky, which was beginning to take on the golden hues of dusk. "We have everything that really matters." When they got home, Edward looked at the mansion that once seemed perfect but cold. Now it was filled with life, with laughter, with genuine love. The walls echoed with the voices of a truly united family. "Edward," Helen said, "thank you for teaching me that it's never too late to start over." "Thank you for teaching me that true love always finds a way, Mother." "Even when that way goes through a park," Sophia laughed, "and a simple question about knowing a sister." "Especially then," Edward replied, hugging his two daughters. That night, as they watched movies together, Edward realized he had learned the most important lesson of his life, that true wealth isn't in inheritances or social status, but in the courage to face the truth and fight for those we love. And that sometimes the most impossible coincidences reveal the most important truths. The twins discovered they had always been sisters in their hearts, and that no conspiracy can destroy the bonds of blood when they are strengthened by genuine love and justice. And the entire family learned that forgiveness and redemption are possible when true love is present. The park, once a scene of charitable handouts, now represented family reunion and proof that love always finds a way, even when powerful forces try to tear it apart.